Speaker.
Denise Roche.
Ina mana, ina reo, ina rangatira mā, ina iwi I hui nei, tēnā koutou. Nau mai, haere mai I te whare paramata. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to speak on behalf of the Greens on these bills. Not just because this is the most positive experience of Parliament that I've ever had, but also because for me personally, as I said in my first speech on the Omnibus Bill, I whakapapa to the great warrior Te Rauparaha through his mother, Pari Kohatu, and the Raukawa line. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity in my privileged position as an MP to read the true histories of Aotearoa through these settlement deeds. The story of Ngati Toa Rangatira is perhaps one that is more widely known than most iwi, due to the famous ancestor Te Rauparaha and his fearsome reputation as a warrior, and of course in his role as the composer of the Haka kaumate. And I note that as part of the settlement outlined in the claims legislation, the Haka kaumate Attribution Bill will also be passed today to ensure the intellectual property rights of the iwi is acknowledged and that the haka is recognised as a taonga belonging to Ngati Toa Rangatira and the ancestor Te Rauparaha as the composer whenever their haka is performed. Mr. Speaker, the legislation has taken a long time to get to this House. The deed of settlement was signed in 2012. However, the legal action goes right back to the actions of the New Zealand company in the 1830s, when the first dodgy dealings with that company resulted in the first large tracts of land in the South Island being alienated. And given their warlike nature, there is no way that Ngati Toa Rangatira was ever going to relinquish their land holdings without a fight. And there have been many over the generations who've carried on that fight. The original claims for this settlement were made in 1986, and I want to also acknowledge the Kuia Te Ratu Williams up in the gallery today, and also acknowledge those who've passed on, the other 13 claimants. And it's taken 28 years to get to this place. The settlement relates to the graduate alienation of nearly all of the original 4 million hectares that were in Ngati Toa Rangatira's area of interest. That interest includes both the lower part of the North Island and the top of the south. It goes from the Rangatiki in the north and includes the Kapiti Coast, Hutt Valley and Wellington areas, as well as Kapiti and Mana Islands. And it includes large areas of the Marlborough Sounds and much of the northern South Island. How Ngati Toa were alienated from that land is outlined in the legislation, in the deed of settlement. The methods used include the dodgy land sales, war, duress, the Crown awarding land to individual Māori, and exclusion. And these tactics were used with many iwi across Aotearoa in the land grabs of the 1800s. And I use the term duress to this case to describe the dubious land sales that occurred while Te Rauparaha was being illegally detained by the Crown for 18 months, and his nephew, the leader, Te Rangi Haiata, was in exile in the Horowhenua. In this settlement, for the first time, the Crown apologises for that wrongdoing, and I'm going to quote from the settlement deed, the apology, which says, "The Crown unreservedly apologises for the breaches of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and its principles which have hurt and caused prejudice to Ngati Toa Rangatira. The Crown is deeply sorry for its actions that intentionally undermined the mana and rangatiratanga of leading Ngati Toa Rangatira chiefs. In particular, the Crown apologises for its indefinite detention of Te Rauparaha and deeply regrets that it has failed until now to acknowledge this injustice in an appropriate manner. In light of the huge land losses, sir, and the loss of resources that Ngati Toa Rangatira had once utilised, like the whaling industry and the flax trade, the compensation package is modest, and that is also acknowledged in the settlement. The financial and commercial redress is about 72 million, and with some of that it's tagged for express purposes. And by accepting this, Ngati Toa Rangatira are being generous. They're generous with the cultural redress package as well. Ngati Toa Rangatira will have 20 sites vested in them, with another 3 sites that will be jointly vested with the other iwi from Te Tau Ihu. And that means that public access and conservation values will be maintained. And in total, the amount of land comes to about 267 hectares. And I note that the area of occupation, the area that was originally occupied by Ngati Toa was estimated at about 2 million hectares. Kapiti Island will symbolically be vested in the iwi, and then they will return it to the Crown after 10 days, and they will return it to the people of New Zealand. And the iwi will work alongside others to develop the management plans and conservation of that area. This, Mr. Speaker, is incredibly generous, to receive their rightful land and then to give it to the people of New Zealand. I'm mindful that with many settlements that come before the House, there's a lack of public understanding about the history of the iwi and the breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi that they have suffered. And that I'm mindful also that this bill attempts to address some of them. And too often we hear, when these settlements are published, we hear the racist comments that this is part of a gravy train. And whenever I hear that, sir, I'm enraged. We must do more to educate the people, and I support the Honourable Peter Sharples in that call. Mr. Speaker, the Greens' position is, and I must make this point, is that this is not a full and final settlement, and we will say this on every settlement bill and every speech. Undoubtedly, the journey to this day has been hard won, and it should be celebrated. And I want to acknowledge the treaty negotiation team, who must be congratulated on the intricacies of the settlement and how they've maintained a delicate balance between overlapping claims and different from others. But our stance stems from the fact that this is the best deal that the iwi could possibly get at this time, but the compensation, of course, is not full, and that's acknowledged. And we don't believe it's final, because we don't know yet how these historical claims will impact on the generations of Ngati Toa Rangatira yet to come. One thing is for sure, though, undoubtedly Ngati Toa Rangatira will be on a surer economic footing as a result of this settlement, and they can chart a future for their rangatahi and whānau. This is a day to celebrate. We offer our congratulations to Ngati Toa Rangatira and every success. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Honourable Tauhenare.